Will Ferrell on an Apple series, Billy Crudup on an Apple series. Those are the recent talent deals.
What actors have you negotiated for a superhero movie?
As I sit here now, I can't remember a superhero movie that I've negotiated. I've certainly negotiated over my career franchise movies and fantasy movies.
Your Honor, so it's no, you haven't negotiated with for any actors for superhero movies, correct?
So you would define like, I don't know, Jungle Book isn't a superhero movie. It's more of a fantasy.
Okay, so no, correct. Your answer
Okay,
is no.
all right. So as I sit here, I can't think of a Marvel type superhero movie that I've negotiated. Although I know there's one or two in there.
Now, you testified and you agree that Mr. Momoa negotiated his multi-picture contract for Aquaman 2, correct?
I heard Mr. Hamada say there was a renegotiation, but no facts were pro-offered, such as he didn't have an option. His options were out. What he was earning and what he renegotiated to, and he is Aquaman Man. So yes, I did hear there was a renegotiation.
And you understand that his salary went from $3 to $4 million to $15 million.
If you tell me that, I haven't seen his contract and I haven't heard any testimony under oath that that's where the leap was.
Now, Ms. Heard's contract.
Did he get more? Did they get more options for when they made that leap? Did they get more options?
Ms. Heard's contract was a talent option contract, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you agree that for if there's an Aquaman 3, Ms. Heard would have an option to receive $4 million, correct, for the movie?
Well, actually, you would language it. Warner Brothers would have the option to engage her.
And if they engaged her, she would receive $4 million, correct?
She doesn't have the option to refuse. They have the option to engage her.
And she would receive $4 million, correct?
Yes, $4 million.
Would you agree that the money Amber was making on Aquaman 2 or 3 would be her market rate for future studio movies?
I would think it would be her rate for future studio superhero movies, but not necessarily studio movies that aren't superheroes. That could be standalone. That could be other type of studio movies.
But for studio superhero movies, it would be $4 million, correct?
If I was Ms. Heard's agent, that's where I would start. Assuming everything was equal, the budget of the superhero movie, that she was in the ensemble. There's a lot of ifs to look at, but all things being equal.
You agree that Aquaman was a breakthrough role for Ms. Heard, wasn't it?
It's the first movie of that ilk that she makes, but she is not Aquaman. She is Mira.
But it was a breakthrough movie for Ms. Heard, correct?
For her, it's a breakthrough movie to be in that film and in the ensemble. Absolutely.
And she was the female star of that movie, correct?
I believe so.
You would agree that for all of the actors Ms. Arnold listed as comparables, their career trajectory went up after their breakthrough, correct?
She didn't give us the raw materials to look at, but I'll take your word that all those unrelated actors in unrelated films, except for Jason Momoa, they went up. As did Miss Arnold's when she went from 1 to 2.
In your experience, can you identify an actor or an actress who's not been able to get a new studio movie after a breakthrough performance in a superhero movie?
As I sit here now, I haven't been asked to opine on that, but there are lots of supporting characters in movies that don't appear in the next movie.
But a female star in a breakthrough movie, in a superhero movie, can you identify any actress who's not gotten another studio movie after that?
Well, after Miss Heard's breakthrough in 2018, She did get Aquaman 2.
Aquaman 2 was already, she already had the option for Aquaman 2,
all right,
correct?
so she did. Ms. Heard did not get any movies after 2018, long before the Adam Waldman statements.
Other than Ms. Heard, can you identify any actor or actress who's not gotten another studio movie after their breakthrough in a superhero movie?
As I sit here now, I haven't been asked to research that, and I can't. That would be a normal thing.
And you're not providing an alternative number for Ms. Heard's damages, correct, for the jury?
Correct. I'm not providing an alternative number. I think she's been more than adequately paid.
I'd move to strike after no, I've not been provided another number. That's all. I mean, my question was you're not providing another number.
I think it's in fairness and with the full answer of the question, Your Honor.
It was a yes or no question. He said his answer was no.
I'm not going to strike it.
Okay. All right. No further
All
questions.
right. Redirect.
Mr. Marks, in response to some questions from Mr. Nadehaft, you were discussing some franchise and fantasy movie agreements that you've negotiated with actors. Could you just describe some of those for us?
I've had such a long career that I mainly forget what I've done, but I negotiated all the contracts for Pinocchio, if you will, that was produced. Is Coming to America, the original, is that a fantasy movie? The Golden Child, is that a fantasy movie? Yeah, and by the way, I may have negotiated contracts, and ultimately the film wasn't made, but as I sit here now, those are the only ones that come to pass. If I was looking at my resume or going through my files, I might think of others, but there isn't a deal that I haven't made.
And I think you also testified in response to Mr. Nadelhaft's questions that you have negotiated some deals for Chris Pratt and Paul Rudd. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes, these are for a streaming series.
Do you happen to know if both of those actors have played Marvel superheroes?
I believe they have, but don't quote me because, that's not my genre.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Marks. You can, you're free to stay in the courtroom or you can leave, okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Your next witness.
Plaintiff calls Michael Spindler.
Michael Spindler. You've testified previously, correct, Mr. Spindler? All right. Just a reminder that you're still under oath, okay, sir?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Spindler.
Good morning.
Can you remind the jury who you are and what you do?
Yes, I'm Michael Spindler. I'm a forensic accountant. I'm a CPA, a certified fraud examiner, amongst some other certifications. I'm with B. Riley Advisory Services, a national firm that does forensic accounting, bankruptcy and restructuring work, and business valuations and appraisals. I've got over 40 years of experience.
Are you familiar with the testimony rendered by Ms. Arnold in this matter?
Yes, I am.
Do you understand that Ms. Arnold testified that Ms. Heard has suffered economic damages resulting from 3 statements made by Mr. Waldman?
Yes, I do.
Do you have an opinion of that claim?
I do.
All right.
Thanks, Mr. Spindler. Now, you indicated that you had listened to Ms. Arnold, and she testified on behalf of Ms. Heard relative to economic damages. Have you formed an opinion as to the testimony and opinion rendered by Ms. Arnold?
Yes, I have.
And what's that opinion?
It is not adequately supported, and it is unreasonable.
There were multiple elements to that analysis, both damages that related to her film career and to endorsements. Have you analyzed both those issues?
Yes, I have.
What is your opinion of the claims that have been asserted relative to the film career and endorsements?
Okay, well, first of all, with respect to her damages calculation, there was no calculation per se. She initially looked at these comparable actors and seemed to use that as a basis for numbers. She didn't provide the underlying calculation. She didn't provide underlying support. And then it appeared as though in her testimony, she backed away a little bit from that, but she still suffers from the issues of not providing detailed calculations or support for where those numbers come from. And she still, to some extent, appears to be using some kind of comparable analysis.
All right. What is the type of analysis that you think is appropriate here?
Well, I think, and as you heard from the last witness, I think that something that is anchored in facts, taking a look at historical compensation as a basis for anticipating future compensation.
Had you looked at Ms. Heard's prior compensation?
Yes, I have. I've looked at tax returns that were provided for the period of 2013 through 2019.
Why do you want to use historical earnings?
Well, once again, you want an analysis that's anchored in fact. I don't believe that Ms. Arnold has done that in her analysis. So here we've got some actual data, we've got some historical compensation, and as the last witness mentioned, that often provides somewhat of a basis for future anticipated earnings. In addition, I believe that Ms. Arnold herself said that she had hoped to be able to look at a renegotiated salary for Aquaman 2 and then use that as a basis for future compensation, that being the new kind of base, if you will.
All right. Were there any years in particular that you focused on in your analysis as to Ms. Arnold's testimony?
In terms of the historical compensation?
Yes.
Well, for 2013 through 2019 in total, her compensation was around $10 million for all those years combined. In 2019, the last of those years, her compensation was somewhere between about $2.6 million and $3 million. Now, that's a good year. That's known as a clean year.
What do you mean by a clean year?
Well, for example, 2019, you had Aquaman was released in December of 2018, and that was a successful film. So in 2019, you've got the benefit of that kind of success, and you also don't have any potential impact from the alleged defamatory Waldman statements that occurred in April of 2020. So 2019 is clean of all that.
What did you understand Ms. Arnold's methodology to be?
Her methodology initially appeared to be based on these comparable actors that she had identified, and theoretically, the compensation that they earned, although she doesn't identify what that compensation is or provide any support for it or any calculations.
What is your opinion of that methodology from an accounting perspective?
That methodology was unsound. It's just unsupported. There are no numbers. There's no data that she provided as support for that.
What methodology did you understand Ms. Arnold to adopt at trial?
Okay, well, it looked like somewhat of a mix and match approach. She used different approaches, I believe, for different elements of the damages, although it's still a little bit unclear to me, a little bit vague. But there are 4 basic components that she was looking at, and we can go through those in any order you wish.
All right. With respect to the television series portion of her analysis, what do you understand that methodology to be?
Okay.
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach?
All right.
The earnings from television shows. Did you analyze what historical earning Ms. Heard had during the period that you were concerned with relative to television shows?
Well, yes. During 2019, she entered into a contract in July of 2019 to appear in a television series at $200,000 per episode.
All right. What about endorsement deals? Did you look at what she had made on endorsement deals during that period?
She did have a contract with L'Oreal at $1,625,000.
All right. With respect to her movie roles, what were her historical earnings during that period?
Well, certainly for the most recent years, you had the Warner Brothers deal, which was a 4-picture deal. The first film was $450,000. Then the first Aquaman was $1 million base fee. Then $2 million for Aquaman 2, and presuming that there was an Aquaman 3, that would have been $4 million.
Okay. Why do you look at historical earnings as part of your analysis?
Because you want your analysis to be anchored in facts. You want it to have a sound methodology, and you want to come up with a reasonable result. So if you take a look at, for example, the analysis that Ms. Arnold did, it didn't appear to be...
Let's just look at the analysis that you're doing. What you said, I think, is you wanted them anchored in facts. Why?
Because that provides a sound basis for coming up with something with reasonable certainty. There's AICPA, or American Institute of Certified Public Accountant, guidance with respect to reasonable certainty. And those are the basic elements of it.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right, cross-examination.
Hello again, Mr. Spindler.
Good morning.
I'm going to ask you a few questions that may refer to the statements in Amber's counterclaim against Mr. Depp. When I refer to those statements, I'm going to refer to them as the Depp-Waldman statements. Do you agree that we can both be on the same page what I'm referring to when I say that?
That's fine. You can use your terminology.
I'm sorry, there's an objection, sir. Hold on.
Can we approach?
Okay.
So, Mr. Spindler, when I refer to the Depp-Waldman statements, you understand me to be referring to the statements in Ms. Heard's counterclaim against Mr. Depp, correct?
I'll understand that, yes.
Now, you're here to provide a rebuttal opinion to part of Ms. Arnold's testimony, correct?
Correct.
You're not providing opinion on whether Ms. Heard suffered defamation by Mr. Depp, correct?
That is true.
You're not offering an opinion as to any of the underlying facts relating to whether Mr. Depp abused Amber, correct?
That's correct.
You're not offering an opinion as to the magnitude of damages that you believe Ms. Heard may be entitled to if she proves defamation by Mr. Depp. You're just reviewing what Ms. Arnold has said, correct?
That's correct.
And you said that you want your analysis to be accurate in the facts, right?
Anchored in facts.
Anchored in facts. You'd agree that what an actor earns in one period isn't necessarily reflective of what he or she may earn in future periods, correct?
Correct.
And that's because
there can be some variability.
An increase in the number of roles may lead to greater income, correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I was speaking it in here.
One of the reasons that what you earn in one period may not be reflective of what an actress may earn in future periods is because an increase in the number of roles may lead to greater income, correct?
The number of roles or the particular project itself, yes.
Sure, getting better roles may lead to greater income, correct?
Correct.
And the same is true for an endorsement. As an actress's profile grows, the amount of money that she may be able to earn from endorsements grows as well, correct?
It can.
So
It depends.
what Ms. Heard earned from, say, 2013 to 2019 that you testified to isn't necessarily reflective of what she might earn over the next 5 years, correct?
Not necessarily. It is a good indicator, though.
And you'd agree that from 2013 to 2019, in terms of earnings and star power, that Ms. Heard's career trajectory was on the upswing, correct?
There was a slight increase during that period of time in her earnings from 2013 through 2019.
And you'd agree that that was as a result of getting more lucrative roles, right?
Yes,
Now, you're not a causation expert, right? You're just a damages expert.
that's correct.
So you're not testifying as to whether the Depp-Waldman statements caused her to lose any roles, correct?
That's correct.
And you're not offering any opinion as to whether the Depp-Waldman statements kept her from being considered for roles that she otherwise would have been considered for, correct?
That's correct. I'm not testifying on causation issues.
And you can't speak to what opportunities may never have materialized for Amber as a result of the Depp-Waldman statements, correct?
Yeah, I've not done those calculations.
And you don't have an opinion about whether or not Ms. Heard could have renegotiated a contract for Aquaman 2, correct?
That was not part of my work.
And you don't have an opinion on the impact that additional exposure or press coverage or magazine covers or interviews would have had on Ms. Heard's career, correct?
Correct. I'm just looking at Ms. Arnold's calculations.
You've never served as an expert witness before to calculate damages based on lost roles by an actress resulting from defamation against that person, correct?
I've been involved in defamation cases, but I've not done the calculations as an expert witness and testified thereto.
And there's never been an instance in which you have served as an expert witness in a case to calculate damages based on alleged defamation against an actress, correct?
Correct.
And you're not offering any expert opinion on what impact the alleged defamation by Mr. Depp has had on Ms. Heard's career, correct?
I'm sorry, one more time?
You're not offering any expert opinion on what impact the Depp-Waldman statements by Mr. Depp has had on Ms. Heard's career, correct?
Other than taking a look at Ms. Arnold's calculations.
And you're not offering any expert opinion about what impact, if any, social media coverage of this case or of Ms. Heard may have had on Ms. Heard's career, correct?
You're correct. That's other experts.
Can we approach
No
Your
further
Honor?
questions. Thank you.
All right.
For you.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Spindler. You can have a seat in the courtroom, or
Thank you,
you're free to
everyone.
go. Thank you. All right, your next witness.
Plaintiff calls Doug Banya, Your Honor.
Okay. Can you spell the last name for me? I'm sorry.
B-A-N-I-A.
Thank you. All right, so you can. So just a reminder that you're still under oath, okay, sir? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Banya.
Good afternoon.
Can you briefly reintroduce yourself to the jury, please?
Yes, hi, Doug Banya. I am from Nevium Intellectual Property Consultants based in San Diego. I value intellectual property. I provide litigation support in infringement and defamation cases, as I'm doing today. And I use internet and social media analytics in both of those services.
Since you last testified in this case, the jury has heard testimony from Ronald Schnell and Catherine Arnold. Are you familiar with their testimony?
Yes.
Were you asked to analyze their testimony and provide opinions in response?
Yes, I was.
Have you formed opinions in response to the testimony of Mr. Schnell and Ms. Arnold?
I have.
Generally, what are those opinions?
Generally, Mr. Schnell provided no evidence of a correlation between the Waldman statements and the hashtags and the spikes of those hashtags on Twitter. Second, based on my internet and social media analytics investigation, I've concluded that the alleged comparable actors that Ms. Arnold came up with are not comparable with Ms. Heard. And then thirdly, Mr. Schnell and Ms. Arnold both failed to provide any evidence of a causation as it relates to the Waldman statements causing any economic harm to Ms. Heard.
Let's dig into those opinions a little bit. You're familiar with the testimony of Mr. Schnell that there are more than 2.7 million alleged negative tweets related to Ms. Heard between January 2018 and June 2021?
Yes.
And what's your understanding of how Mr. Schnell identified those particular 2.7 million tweets?
Yeah, so essentially Mr. Schnell chose hashtags that he felt were negative towards Ms. Heard. Those hashtags range from justice for Johnny Depp, Amber Heard is an abuser, Amber Turd, and the hashtag, we just don't like you, Amber. So then he used those hashtags and he searched through, using the Twitter API, searched through various tweets and then came up with any tweets that were using those hashtags.
Did you conduct an analysis of those tweets?
Yes, I was given that exact, the data that Mr. Schnell used on a hard drive. So yes, I dug into that data as well.
And what was the purpose of your analysis?
So what I'm trying to do, and what's at issue of the case today at this point is, were these tweets, did they contain the Waldman statements? That's what where we're at right now, are the Waldman statements. So I wanted to analyze those tweets to determine which ones, and if any, contain the Waldman statements.
And what's your understanding of what the Waldman statements are?
So my understanding is there's three Waldman statements that were published in the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail is a UK tabloid, and Mr. Arnold was quoted in three of those articles. And those dates were on April 8th, 2020, April 27th, 2020, and on June 24th, 2020. And my understanding that those quotes, sorry, I think I said the wrong name, but those quotes are the only remaining in this case.
Did you analyze the timing of the tweets that we were talking about as compared to the timing of the Waldman statements?
And that's exactly what I did. So I wanted to look at the Waldman statements, look at the dates that they happened, and then analyze those as compared to the Twitter data that I had.
Have you prepared a demonstrative that reflects that aspect of your analysis?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes. Did you show counsel?
hashtags and tweets that Mr. Schnell was analyzing. This is the summary data. There are tweets that are running from January 2018 to June of 2021. And again, these are related to the four hashtags that I discussed. Whenever I get an assignment such as this, when I'm dealing with a defamatory statement that's allegedly gone viral online, where there's economic damages involved and there's a lot of data involved, I like to take the data and I like to do a 30,000-foot view of the data to see what I'm looking at, to see if there's anything interesting, odd, different about the data. And the first thing that I noticed is 35% of the tweets were prior to the Waldman statements. So again, remember, my assignment is to determine if the Waldman statements are part of the tweets that Mr. Schnell analyzed. So obviously, if these tweets were prior to the Waldman statements, in no way could they have anything to do with the Waldman statements. So that was the first issue that I noticed. Then I noticed what I like to call kind of the alleged defamatory time frame. And as I discussed, that's when the Waldman statements were published. That's the date down here. You know, the first one was in the beginning of April, and the last one, which is the third one, was at the end of June. But what I found interesting is only 2% of all of the tweets happened during this Waldman statement period. So really, these are just observations, and for me, there were red flags that I made note of, and then I just continued with my analysis.
What other work have you performed in connection with forming your opinions about the purportedly negative tweets?
Yeah, so now I realize that 35% are irrelevant and 2%, only happened during this important period. I just continued to dig into the 2.79 million tweets that Mr. Schnell provided.
And Tom, can we take that one down? And Mr. Banya, have you prepared another demonstrative that depicts that analysis that you were just describing?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I?
Okay, yes.
All right. To be used as a demonstrative.
Okay, we'll just see if he has an objection. No, I'll give you time to look at it, sir. All right, plaintiffs, you can turn on your microphone, I'm sorry.
No objection as a demonstrative.
Okay, all right, plaintiffs exhibit 1294 will be marked for identification as a demonstrative and will be published to the jury.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Banya, can you explain what this demonstrative shows?
Yes, this is showing the various spikes as it relates to the hashtags that Mr. Schnell testified about. This is actually an exhibit or a demonstrative that he used in his testimony. What this is showing are the largest spikes related to the hashtag Justice for Johnny Depp. I don't know if you remember his testimony or any of his demonstratives. The other three hashtags did spike at the same time, but a very small spike. So what I'm showing you here are the 6 top spikes in Mr. Schnell's analysis. And what's important here again is the very first spike and the largest spike, again, happened before the Waldman statements. So what I'm trying to figure out is what tweets were related to the Waldman statements. So this number 1 spike, which is the biggest spike, was prior to the Waldman statements, so it's irrelevant to the case. And then the second thing I noticed that was interesting here is here are the dates in gray, right here. This is the time in which the Waldman statements happened. And you're going to notice, as we discussed before, only 2% of the tweets happened during that time. But I found it very interesting for such a viral event that has potentially caused such economic harm. There's no spikes in this area. And actually, you're going to see that Mr. Waldman, his statement came out here in the first April 2020 article. Then the second one came out here, and then the third one came out in June. There's actually a downward use of the spike, downward use of the hashtags. So I'm not seeing any correlation as it relates to the Waldman statements and any spikes here as it relates to the hashtags Mr. Schnell chose.
Did you analyze each of the spikes that are depicted here?
Yeah, so what I did is I looked at the 6 different spikes, and you're going to notice that each spike represents a month. So the second spike, is July of 2020, and so on to the 6th spike going to April 2021. And what I did is, I don't know if you remember my last testimony when I went into Google search, and I'm able to go into Google search. I went in and I typed in Amber Heard. And then after you hit search, you can use the tool and you can go back in time. And I chose each 6 of these dates to go back in time to see what was the media talking about back then. What was the general public being fed as it relates to Amber Heard back during those spikes. And what I found is none of them, well, actually I analyzed the top 3 search results because they represent 50 to 70% of what people click on. And I realized that none of them had anything to do with the Waldman statements.
Are you aware of Mr. Schnell's testimony that the tweets using the 4 hashtags he looked at were mathematically correlated?
Yes.
What does that mean?
So what Mr. Schnell is saying, which is irrelevant to this case, is the 4 hashtags that he randomly chose, they tend to go up and down together. And that's why he had these spikes here. So the correlation there is how those 4 hashtags work or dance together going up and down. But first of all, the hashtags have nothing to do with the Waldman statements. And the fact that there's a correlation with the hashtags is irrelevant to this case because we're dealing with the Waldman statements, which none of that correlation analysis he did had to do with.
How do you know that the correlation doesn't have anything to do with the Waldman statements?
Can I clear this at all? No. Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, I know because that would happen right here. If when Mr. Waldman, one of his quotes was published, you would see a big spike right here. And then you would see maybe a little noise down here, and then the third time you might see second time a big spike, and the third time a big spike. That's not here. So that's telling me there's no correlation between the Waldman statements and this hashtag use. And then I've actually provided evidence that there's no correlation because I analyze each of these spikes and none of them had to do with the Waldman statements.
Is mathematical correlation the same as causation?
No.
Why not?
I mean, correlation is simply a relationship between 2 or more variables or 2 or more things. In this case, the correlation question is, when the Waldman statements were published, at the same time, did you see a correlation with spikes in these hashtags? And again, can we clear this? You see none of that right here. It's actually a downward trend. There's no spikes, there's no correlation. So, again, Mr. Schnell provided no evidence of any correlation.
What correlation opinion did he provide during his testimony?
Well, he provided the correlation that the 4 hashtags, spike together. But again, the hashtags have nothing to do with the Waldman statements, and the facts that they're correlating or moving together is irrelevant to the case because the case is about the Waldman statements.
So what is causation then?
So causation is where one thing causes a change in the other. So as it relates to this case, did the Waldman statements cause Ms. Heard to have economic harm? In other words, did the Waldman statements cause Ms. Heard not to make as much money in her career? And again, Mr. Schnell provided no evidence of this. Ms. Arnold provided no evidence of this. And as a matter of fact, during Ms. Arnold's testimony yesterday, she didn't even know what causation was. She was asked, do you know the difference between causation and correlation? And she said that she's not a semantics expert. We're not talking about the words. When it comes to damages, you have to prove causation prior to calculating damages. So there is no causation that's proven here. Therefore, a damages analysis is not appropriate.
Did you hear Mr. Schnell testify that he agreed with your opinion in this case?
Yes.
And what's your understanding of the opinion that he agreed with?
Well, he agreed that he failed to link the spikes in the hashtags on Twitter to the Waldman statements.
Did he try to do that?
He tried to do that. But again, his analysis was looking at the word Waldman and looking at the word Waldmanian, and then trying to say that 25% of the tweets included those two terms. But first of all, Waldman isn't the issue here. It's the Waldman statements. And Waldmanian, I don't even know what that is, but it's not relevant to this case.
We can, I think, take that one down, please, Tom. Mr. Banya, what other work have you done in connection with forming your opinions about Mr. Schnell's testimony?
Again, the assignment was to determine if the Waldman statements were part of the tweet, so I continued to dig in, to the data. I believe the next step is, now that I've excluded, the 35% that was before the Waldman statements because they were irrelevant, I wanted to really analyze from the April 2020 forward to see if any of those tweets, contained the Waldman statements.
Did you prepare a demonstrative that reflects that analysis that you did?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, may I approach again?
All right, yes, ma'am. Any objections, sir?
No objection as a demonstrative.
All right, we'll mark it for identification as plaintiffs 1295 as demonstrative and publish to the jury.
So, Mr. Banya, did you consider the content of the statements made by Waldman as part of the work that you did?
Yes. Yeah, so here I reviewed the Waldman statements again, and what I wanted to do is I wanted to determine what, if any, tweets included the Waldman statements. So what I went back to the Waldman statements, and I came up with key terms and key themes for those Waldman statements, which are listed here. The Waldman statements were about abuse hoax, sexual violence hoax, and fake sexual violence. So what I did is we're now dealing with a 1.2 million tweets because, we're starting in April 2020 because that's when the Waldman statements started. And what I did is I searched the 1.2 million tweets, for these three phrases. And I determined that there were 751 tweets that included those key terms, which is 0.06% of the 1.2 million. And then as I was sifting and sorting and analyzing this data, I realized that a lot of these tweets had the exact same language. It was interesting to see it was the exact same tweet because I'm analyzing the language to see if it matches one of these three. I realized that a lot of these tweets were retweets, likes, or shares. So therefore, I eliminated any of those, and it came down with 95 unique tweets. And then what I did from there is I analyzed those to determine if any of these terms were in there, and I identified 5 tweets that were related to the Waldman statements.
Do any of the hashtags Mr. Schnell analyzed include the words from the Waldman statements?
No, they don't. And, because I am rebutting Ms. Arnold, her testimony yesterday, she was saying that the Waldman statements caused these hashtags. Then throughout her testimony, she walked that back and admitted, No, none of these tweets have anything to do with the Waldman statements. They don't include the Waldman statements. You know, these hashtags are only hashtags that Schnell, in his opinion, felt that they were negative towards Ms. Heard.
Based on your expertise, what are your overall opinions about Mr. Schnell's testimony and the Twitter hashtag data?
You know, Mr. Schnell provided no evidence that any of the tweets were related to the Waldman statements. Mr. Schnell, there's no correlation there. He also provided no evidence that there's any causation that, you know, the Waldman statements caused any economic harm towards Ms. Heard.
Your Honor, I'm about to switch to a different topic. I don't know if you want to break now or push.
All right, it's going to be a little while, I assume?
A little bit more, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and break for lunch, ladies and gentlemen, okay? Do not discuss the case and do not do any outside research, okay? All right, we'll come back at 1:40 then. Is that right? All right,
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right.